Guests on Keel are heard via the Jack Spring Electric Keel Newsmaker hotline. The latest of those is Dr. Catherine O'Neill. She is an infectious disease specialist at Our Lady of the Lake Regional Medical Center in Baton Rouge, Whew. Hey, Dr. O'Neill, welcome to Keel. How you doing this morning?
Good morning. How are you?
Okay, let's start here. And I'm really being serious here because we've read, Aaron and I have both read a couple of articles, 3 or 4 actually, and we're still a little sort of confused. Could you do a real quick class for us, herd immunity for dummies?
Yes, absolutely. Herd immunity is an interesting topic. We experience it every year with the flu. So for those of us who have children, if you can imagine our kids enter a classroom every day, and say my kid has the flu and sits in the back of the class. The more members of the class who have already been infected and are immune are going to protect the teacher at the front of the class from ever catching my kid's flu, right? So my kid sits at the back of the class and coughs and coughs and coughs, and I've got 4 rows at least of kids in between my kid and the teacher. If only 2 kids are protected, then everybody's going to get sick. If 50% of the class is protected, depending on how well my child covers his cough, maybe the teacher's never going to see it. If 90% of the class is infected and immune, that virus is never going to reach the front of the class, and the teacher's going to stay safe. So herd immunity is just a wall of immune cells between the one person who's still sick and the last person who hasn't gotten it. The stronger that is, the less likely spread continues because everybody else is.
Excuse me just a second. I am looking down to the other end of the other end of the gopher-shaped broadcast table. Erin, a light bulb just went off over her head. But what were you going to say?
Well, so you essentially want more people to get the virus. I mean, is that essentially the theory here?
In the natural case of disease, once more people get the virus, we'll see less of it. What you want is a vaccine that allows you herd immunity. So in flu season, we say vaccinate these kids, vaccinate these kids. Why do we do that? Kids overall do fairly well with the flu, but they also are hyper shedders. So if we give them the vaccine, we protect the whole population by giving a significant portion of the shedders of the virus protection against the virus. So that herd immunity is often what we're trying to reach with the vaccination.
So was closing the schools maybe a wrong approach?
No. So the whole purpose of social distancing and closing the schools was to slow the spread. We never thought that we could contain this virus once we saw this many cases in the United States. Our approach has totally been to not overwhelm the country with so many sick people that people die just from sheer lack of medical care. And here in Baton Rouge, our beds are full. We are at the end of our ability to offer care. We're still offering care, but we couldn't take a whole lot more patients. They have to come in slowly over the next couple of days to have a bed for everybody. And that's been accomplished by social distancing and closing the schools. Otherwise, we would have seen a time just like you're seeing in New York where ambulances are lining up and there's no beds for anybody.
But on the other hand, here's where I'm a little confused. By social distancing, aren't we thereby preventing the building of the herd immunity? And if that is to a great degree the goal, how do we accomplish that without spiking the number of cases in people who have comorbidities?
We're doing it slowly. So, for instance, my parents who have a couple of comorbidities and are at home doing what they need to do, by the time they need to see a doctor, and should one of them become sick enough to need the hospital, we're going to have the medical care necessary to keep them alive and give them what we need and then turn them out and go back into the community. So we're just slowing the onset of herd immunity to allow everybody to receive medical care when they do become ill. We'll reach it slower.
Do you disagree with the theory, with the thought being put forth by some medical professionals, by some specialists also, who say that we should have left the world open, so to speak, and quarantined the people who were at high risk?
I think that's an interesting theory. And of course, if you assume that it's only the people who are high risk that get sick, then that works out for you. It depends on whether or not you're willing to risk at 45 the infection and the lack of medical care. What we've seen is absolutely a lot of nursing home patients, people with several comorbidities coming into the hospital very sick and needing intubation. But we have, just like Italy and just like China, seen this group of people who are just like medical care workers, 40s, 50s. What I thought was not really a comorbidity, which is my lifelong asthma, is the one thing that puts me on a ventilator. So when we talk about those people who are susceptible, it is not just our frail nursing home patients. It is our workforce too, and that's why they're also at home. We can't afford to lose a significant amount of our workforce because we couldn't offer them medical care.
A quote from you. Let me read it and you explain. We hope that greater than 50% of us will ultimately become infected over a slow period of time. I'm hoping by the late fall to winter. That's your quote. But you're the 50% you're saying these are going to be people that are not going to really even have symptoms, correct?
That's right. And so we hope, and I think because of the community spread that we have seen since that discussion, that will be earlier, is when we can begin talking about slow restarts of the economy and of the workforce. It's not herd immunity at 50%, but at least it gives you the chance to say, hey, you've been sick. I think you can come back, and start to participate more in life. You're less likely to spread the virus. It's not an absolute, but after you've been infected, we have enough evidence to know that people with immunity are usually more protected from becoming ill again, at least for a short period of time.
So how do we do that? I mean, if
and when do we get back?
If you're saying that we should maintain social distancing, but we have to reintroduce slowly people into society who will be asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic, how do we do that?
It's going to be a combination of a lot of approaches, and obviously it depends on what your normal day looks like. So, for instance, schools have the ability to do some distance learning, and luckily we're at the tail end of the school system, the school year, so that rollback can be slower. For a workforce, a business, a factory where you need people back in, I think it'll be a combination of antibody testing. While that antibody testing is not perfect at all, and we're still learning a lot about it, it is all we have, proof that you've been infected. So the more people we're able to test, the more we know who's actually already had the virus, and that will be helpful. And then continued social distancing at work. The lack of meetings and WebEx and Zoom and our new life that we're living, I don't think that's going to go away. I think that's the only way to continue to protect everyone else for a little while we attempt to get back to work.
Vaccine timetable. What do you know? What can you share with us? How soon? And a lot of us are a little squeamish about those first vaccines.
Do you have any secrets?
I don't have a secret. Vaccines take a while. They've been working on a vaccine for SARS and MERS, similar enough coronaviruses, for a long time, and have had difficulties with that vaccine production. And so I do think that we continue to look forward to a vaccine in 2021.